What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Off the Ball podcast with me, your host, Chris LeBron. I have a special guest with me today, Matt Babcock, NBA Draft Analyst, owner and founder of BabcockHoops. Matt, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, man. So, for people who don't know a little bit about you, you were a former agent too, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just talk to me a little about, that process, going through all that, and then transitioning to now being an NBA draft analyst, and just talk about the transition from that.
Okay, yeah. So one important thing about my background is that I grew up in a basketball family. My dad, my two uncles have all worked in the NBA for a long time, so I'm sort of just born into it. Knew from a young age that I wanted to work in basketball. Played high school basketball, played in college. And then when I got out of college, I was, just like any kid, 22-year-old kid, I was looking for a job, looking for my starting point, and kind of took what I could get, and I got which was a great opportunity. I got an internship at Wasserman Media Group, which was at the time was the biggest sports agency in all of sports.
Wow.
And it was a summer internship, and so the job was to assist Dave Yeager, who was a D League coach at the time, with all their pre-draft workouts. They ended up having, I think, 6 or 7 first-round picks. And so my goal was to be a coach. I was going to use that as just an opportunity to kind of get some credibility, get my feet wet coaching and working players out. And so I did that summer internship. And they also had me do some stuff in the office, which was my first real exposure to the agency business. And from there, I took an assistant coaching job with a professional team in Italy. And then I was offered a job with another big agency, and they kind of pitched this idea of grooming me to be an agent. And at that point, that was really the first time I ever really considered even working in the agency business. So one thing led to another, and I'd done it for 10, 11 years. I worked as an agent on my own, had my own clients, and just decided, hey, you know what? I need to probably get back closer to my roots before this, I get too deep into this, which I probably already had. And so I decided to make a drastic move and got out of the agency business and started scouting and started doing some media. And one thing led to another. And now we've got Babcock Hoops, and it's kind of my full-time gig.
Awesome. I actually also delved into the sports agency business too. When I graduated from college in 2011, and I always had a love for, I don't know, I was always infatuated with sports agents. Jerry Maguire was like my first when I watched that movie, I was like, I know as crazy as it was, that movie, but I was like, that looks like it's fun. I know it's a lot, but it looks fun, and I did it for a little bit. I was a part of an agency for a year, and then I realized, wow, this is hard. I'm this is really, and I was, when I started, I was with Sports Manager Worldwide. They're based in Oregon, and I'm like, wow, this is really hard. And I was only 22 at the time, so I'm trying to contact clients, and they're telling me, and I'm just like, I'm like a newborn baby. I have no clue what I'm doing, and I'm just trying to get in contact with guys and trying to figure out. I'm like, hey, I'm just giving my name and stuff, and oh, so I don't have all the contacts yet, but I go, and then and they're like, no, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is really tough. So I can imagine the grind of being the agent world. It's a real grind, I can imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely is. I mean, regardless of what level you're working on, in the agency business or as an agent, it's got its challenges any way you look at it. And like I said, I did this for 10, 11 years, and I worked for a number of different agencies, different sizes, started up different basketball divisions of agencies, and kind of got every single angle of it. And it's definitely challenging. It's got it's extreme highs and extreme lows, and it's just either way, it wears you out.
Yeah, I can imagine. So how far, where are you finding guys? Were you just strictly, just do it college guys, or were you getting guys from overseas?
Both. I mean, it depended on the current setup I was operating under. Certain agencies, I mean, were only really wanting high profile NBA players, which there's just not many of those. And
Yeah.
so, it sort of limited your options of who you even could recruit. And then other setups, when I started, I left a big agency and started a basketball division for a prominent hockey agency from complete scratch without any clients. I had worked with a number of NBA players, and sort of my strategic approach was, hey, let's start, start small and kind of build ourselves up here. And so I ended up kind of finding a niche of getting guys that were fringe NBA players, good international players. I created an infrastructure of collaborating partners pretty much all throughout the world. And my mindset was combination of, okay, I need to kind of tiptoe into this from a credibility standpoint, but also I needed to learn the business. And I had only dealt with high level NBA players and the marketing and all of that part of it, where it's just NBA draft and high level marketing. I felt like I needed an understanding of how to manage guys if they needed to go overseas, and the only way of doing that is having players that played over there. And so I did that and kind of found a niche of representing second round picks and guys that would be high level international players. And it led to me bringing guys from Europe to the NBA, and had quite a bit of success with that business model. And yeah, no, it was just it's an interesting business. There's so many different layers to it.
Yeah, I know. So when you have a client, and obviously everyone's goal is to get to the NBA. That's the big, that's everyone's dream. So how do you tell them that, okay, the NBA might not be the route right now. We might have to go overseas and start there, and then maybe make our way to the NBA. How is that? How do you try to make that happen?
It's challenging. I mean, everybody's dream is always, hey, I want to play in the NBA. You don't grow up as a fan of basketball, visualizing yourself being a good international player. You want, for me, I wanted to be Larry Bird or Magic Johnson or
Yeah,
Michael Jordan. And, and so we get to a certain point where everybody needs to kind of, take a look in the mirror and be like, all right, am I doing this for fun or is this my job? And so, part of the recruiting process is, I talked to them about, realigning their priorities and, trying to figure out what's important and setting up a plan that could be mutually beneficial for me as an agent running my own business and accomplishing my own personal goals and needs. But also too, helping the player get organized as far as, hey, what are you trying to get out of this and how do we accomplish it?
yeah, yeah. I can imagine that being tough for certain guys that they want to live their dream, but they got to go a different route sometimes. And it's worked for some guys. Some guys have been able to make that transition from overseas and playing over here. So,
Right.
but so obviously you have you've been around the game a long time, and you have your uncles were GMs, and your father was in the front office with Milwaukee, correct?
Yeah, he still is. He's been there, I believe, 23 years.
Yeah. So, and he's the VP, if I'm correct, right? Is he a
Yeah,
VP?
his title's changed up a few times. At one point, he was general manager. He was vice president player personnel. His current title is director of player personnel, which he's been for a while.
Oh, so he was around when Giannis was drafted. Do you remember that process, and how did that go, and how were they able to find Giannis?
Well, it's yeah, I do remember. We actually were in Italy together at the NBA Euro camp, and there was a big I can't remember if it was a practice or what, but somewhere in Italy, in the whole NBA, everybody that was at this camp drove an hour and a half to see Giannis. So I mean, it wasn't a deal where nobody knew him. There
Hmm.
just wasn't a huge sample size to evaluate him on. He was this young kid, playing in second division Greece, which is just
Yeah,
not very good. I mean, it'd be
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. I heard him
playing
talk
like
about that. Yeah, it's
yeah,
crazy.
it'd be like playing at like the YMCA, in the YMCA league or something like that, right?
Yeah,
And then and before the draft, there wasn't much information. He didn't do physical, so there wasn't medical information. And so, I mean, anybody that was willing to draft him high was taking somewhat of a risk.
yeah,
And my dad obviously really liked him. Their staff liked him, and my dad jokes now that there's a number of guys in the NBA that are our friends. They say, hey, we like Giannis too, and we were going to draft him. And my dad always jokes like, yeah, well, I convinced my GM to do it, so there you go. It's just teasing and joking and whatnot. But no, they rolled the dice on a kid that was somewhat of an unknown, and hey, it really worked out.
Yeah, I think it's worked out pretty well for them. But were they locked in on Giannis at 15, or was there thoughts that maybe he might go higher? So did they think about maybe trading up or so, or were they like, okay, Giannis is going to be here at this pick, and if he's here, we're going to take him?
I don't know. It was a while ago. I don't even know if I was ever even told it. That's probably it's a better question for my dad. But yeah, they liked him. I knew there were some other teams that were interested. I mean, that was legitimate. And there's teams after him that were hoping that he would slip. And they, I don't know, they pulled the trigger. What was it, 15, right?
Yeah, I believe it's 15. Yeah.
And they pulled the trigger. And so I don't have too much insight on that, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great bet. It's going to go down as one of the biggest steals of all time. But so let's get into NBA draft. I know the draft is a few away, but since I'm a Knicks fan, I kind of get early with my draft stuff. So I kind of look into the prospects and stuff. And this draft class is kind of unknown. There's a lot of talented guys in this class, but there's not a lock number one, and it's not like last year's draft where there was so much star power from the top, with Zion, RJ, and Ja. So how would you compare this draft class coming up to last year's draft class?
I feel like a lot of people are being somewhat negative on this year's draft. I personally like it. I don't think it's got a ton of depth, like getting into the second round. But I mean, there are a lot of good players, and there's a lot of parity. I mean, you've got a few guys that I consider being the top tier guys. Then after that, I mean, it's a little bit of let's see who fits where. It's not a ton of guys that's going to be like, all right, this guy's the next pick just because his market value is the highest. So I mean, I think the NBA lottery is going to be really interesting. It's definitely going to be interesting for my mock draft personally. Because I've been updating my mock draft a lot this year for that reason. Exactly is because depending on the order, it changes things up quite a bit.
Yeah,
and so. I mean, I do think there was one difference, for last year. I mean, Zion was one of the most hyped up guys coming into the draft ever, right? And Ja's really, really lived up to expectations too. I don't know if any of these guys are quite on that level, but it's not far off. I mean, I still really like Wiseman, even though everybody's hating on him because he's a big guy and he hasn't been playing. I currently have him at number one. Anthony Edwards has got so much dang talent. Obi Toppin's great. Denny Avdija. I mean, there's a lot of good players in this draft.
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Obi Toppin lately, and I've really fallen in love with his game. I think he's a very versatile big, and he's obviously has his, he has Dayton, I believe they're a top 5 in the country right now, and so has he been your biggest riser?
Yeah, he has. I've liked him since last year. I mean, I didn't expect him to rise this high. I mean, I've got him at number 3, which is
I see.
Which is pretty incredible. I think for a kid that that went to Dayton and was a late bloomer and all that. And
is he kind of like John Morant? Like as far as like people didn't hear a lot about John Morant's freshman year, and it wasn't until his sophomore year to explode. Is that kind of like similar, like with him and Obi?
Yeah, no, I think it's very similar. I mean, similar kind of progression there. And I mean, I keep thinking about it. It's like, God, the right team gets number 1 pick. I mean, could Obi be in play there? And I think he could. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, hey, Obi Toppin's going to be the number 1 pick, but he could be. I mean, I think he should be in the conversation. He is that good, and I've seen him a ton this year. I was in Maui for several days and watched him play a few times, and saw him in Phoenix again, and the more I get to know about him, the more I see him, the more I like him. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of these media outlets and people that are doing mock drafts, they might be overanalyzing this and a little too slow to pull the trigger on a guy that can play. And I mean, he really reminds me of Mari Stoudemire, and that guy was pretty dang good.
Wow, that's a big comp. That's a big comp. But what does he improve most from freshman year to sophomore year?
He's just gotten better all the way around. I don't think there's any one specific thing that he's addressed as far as his skill set and all that. He's producing at a high level. His confidence is just high, and he he's performing. And I mean, he shoots the ball. He high flyer, multiple defend multiple positions. Yeah, I think he translates well, and I mean, I'm hoping their team goes far. They're surely indicating that they're capable.
Yeah, they've definitely been playing great basketball. But since if he's considered a riser, who would you see as a big faller in this draft so far? That was projected to be a high pick, but has fallen of late.
I would say Cole Anthony. He's talked about a lot in the press. It seems like a lot of fans seem to think he's going to be a top guy. With the conversations that I've had, behind closed doors with other, NBA people and whatnot, I don't think he's thought of quite as highly as everybody else thinks he is. I think he'll slip a little further than most of these mock drafts have him.
Yeah, I see you have him at 23. That's a big drop from where he was projected where he's projected to be. But you think it's more because you think the hype was because he has a name and he's been around, obviously with, we live in the social media era where, we see all his highlights and stuff. You think he's more of a product of that than actually being, a great all-around basketball player?
Well, the thing is, he's talented. I mean, I'm not denying his talent. I think it's more of his mental makeup and his approach to the game. Is he good enough to be such an alpha dog? And he's sort of a self-serving point guard, and you got to be pretty dang good to play that way, in my opinion. And so I'm not sure he's everybody's preferred flavor.
Yeah, I can see that. I know a lot of people have been on too high of him lately, but I also want to talk about the overseas guys like RJ Hampton and LaMelo and Denny, and how have they looked so far? Playing, especially LaMelo and RJ. How has their progression been since playing overseas?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Denny Avdia, he's been playing great lately. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like
he's awesome.
I mean, it seems like he is just on the rise, and I mean, he's really, for me, he sort of reminds me of Ben Simmons a little bit. And granted, Ben Simmons is playing point guard for Philly, but I still evaluate him more as a point forward, which is what I think Denny's going to be in the NBA. And yeah, he's unique. He's really good, and all the intel on him is great. Just seems like the right kind of personality to kind of step in and be a big time player in the next few years. I'm really excited about him. With LaMelo and RJ, they're not playing anymore. But LaMelo had a run there. He was doing some pretty big things, and with his size and skill set, I mean, he's an interesting guy. We currently have him at 6, which I think if this were a big board and it was rankings, I think he'd be higher than that. I think he's closer to a top 3 or 4 type guy. I mean, I think he'll probably with each team, if he's a fit, he'll probably be on the board for every pick until he gets drafted.
Yeah.
And so, again, going back to the draft order sort of being important for where these guys go, I think LaMelo falls into that, perfectly as far as, hey, would Cleveland take him? I don't know. I probably not. I mean, they got Sexton, they've got Garland.
Yeah.
Charlotte's got the KU kid that's really on the rise. Graham on
right?
the rise. Yeah, Minnesota just traded for D'Angelo Russell, which I'm assuming they want the ball in his hands. And so, I mean, you kind of go team by team. Atlanta's got Trae Young. I just don't see any of those teams taking LaMelo. And so, I mean, now all of a sudden a guy
perfect,
yeah. So now you've got a guy that could be the number 1 pick in the draft is number 6 on my mock draft. And so it's that's where sometimes the mock drafts can be a little bit deceiving if you look at it as rankings, because it's not rankings.
Yeah, for sure. And what about RJ Hampton?
So RJ is different than LaMelo. I think LaMelo is his skills and sort of like his role is established, like what he is. I mean, he's got a lot of room for improvement. But with RJ, I think he's a little bit more of a project. Right now, I think he's more effective off the ball, rather than being a point guard. he needs to tighten up his shooting, his point guard play, but he is just so athletic. And,
Yeah, he's a
if he is able to polish things up, I mean, he's got a ton of upside. And, the upside guys are always sort of a scary thing because
yeah,
there's a big what if there.
yeah,
Is it
yeah.
going to click? And, you know, every indication is that it will. I mean, I've heard he's a great kid. My evaluations of him, I've watched him play a couple times. I watched him twice when his team came over and played NBA exhibition games, and he didn't even play that well. But man, he just does some stuff where it's like, okay, he's got some stuff he can't teach. I mean, he's got elite quickness and burst. And he's got decent shooting mechanics. I'm pretty excited about him, and but both those guys are good players.
Yeah. With LaMelo, obviously, it's super talented, can shoot. But obviously, he comes with a little bit of baggage with his dad. Do you think teams are going to be scared to take LaMelo because of LeVar? Do you think that's going to be a big factor in his draft?
I don't think scared would be the right word. I mean, I think there's some teams that would be. I think all teams would question it, and I mean, I think everybody's going to do their homework on it, and what is what are things going to be like behind the scenes for him? If we draft this guy, is it going to be a circus like it was in LA with Lonzo? I mean, it seems from the outside looking on in right now. I mean, it seems like things are a little bit more under control. I believe CAA did his deal in Australia, and I'm assuming they'll have him for the draft too. And I mean, that's a big professional agency. So I mean, I think for LaMelo's sake, having an agency like that would probably help him. But we'll see. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a huge roadblock, but it's maybe a slight negative variable in the equation.
Okay. Yeah, because obviously, that's always been a big factor with Melo and stuff. But obviously they have the Facebook show, and I saw that LeVar is going to take a step back so he doesn't hurt LaMelo's chances of getting drafted. So I can agree to that. I don't think it'll be as big as issue as it was previously with the whole LeVar stuff. But who do you see or like a late first round, second round pick that might be able to surprise some people?
There's a few guys that I'm pretty excited about. Robert Woodard from Mississippi State. I love this kid. He's 6'7", 230, strong as heck. He's not like a real dynamic player. Like there's no offense being run for him, but he defends everybody, rebounds, and he can shoot from outside. And so for him, and then also another player that's somewhat similar is Sadiq Bey from Villanova. Not quite as physical as Robert Woodard, but a defender, tough kid, shoots the ball from outside. I think both of these guys could step into the NBA and fill legitimate roles probably day one. And I personally, especially if you're drafting late first round, second round, you're generally more inclined to look at guys that could fill roles rather than be more of a star type potential guy. And I think both those guys fit that bill perfectly.
Okay. And I want to talk about a couple of Duke guys. Vernon Carey. Do you think, obviously the big man is kind of, not as important anymore in the league. Do you think he still has value?
I do. I mean, if this were 20 years ago, this guy'd probably be more of like a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
Now I think we have him 13 right now. It's probably on the higher side for him. But I still think there's value in fives. I mean, obviously they need to have different tools than they did in the past. I mean, a slow-footed big, will have a hard time keeping up in today's game. Vernon Carey, he's a big guy, but he moves pretty well. And another key factor to him is that he's shown promise to be able to step out and shoot it a little bit. And so, I mean, if you're getting a big body guy that can rebound, block shots, finish at the rim as a traditional big would, but also keep up with the guards enough and be able to stretch it, I think there's a place for him. And I mean, if you go across the board in the league, I mean, there's still really good big men that are making a big input in the league. I mean, we've got Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
I mean, DeAndre Ayton was the first pick in the draft 2 years ago. I mean, there's a number of guys that are still really effective that are holding a lot of value to their teams.
And how would you compare Trey Jones to his brother Tyus? I mean, they got similar games, but how would you compare? Because obviously Trey went back for another season, and Tyus, was one and done. So how would you compare their games?
I think they're different, actually. I mean, they look alike.
Yeah, they're
uh,
twins, pretty much.
um, right. I mean, with Tyus, he's a much better shooter, which is Trey's Achilles heel. He shot the
Yeah,
ball
yeah,
pretty well this year, but that's just I still don't fully trust his shooting. In this game, I mean, especially as a perimeter player, you need to be able to shoot the ball. And so, I mean, that's probably going to hold Trey back a little bit. I think Trey's just naturally a better playmaker, floor general, and he is a hawk on the ball. I mean, defensively,
yeah.
Trey is pretty good. Which
He's a pit bull out there.
yeah, and I've gone back and forth on him this year. I mean, I've had him as late as like late second, and I think he's better than that. Right now, we have him at 36, which I think is somewhat on his high side. But I think I don't know. My guts tell me he'll be in this year's draft, and I think he'll be at least a solid second round pick.
Do you think that he's going to think about, like, if he is being evaluated as a second round pick? Do you think that he'll maybe come back for another year and try to get to the first round, or do you think he's probably okay? I did 2 years, and especially it depends how they do in the tournament too, maybe, because I know he won to a national championship, so maybe that has a factor in it too. But you think that his draft evaluation will affect whether he comes back or not?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could. I mean, we'll see. Going back to my agent experience, the kids that are at the big schools. I mean, I think he probably expected to be a one and done. And so, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, for
a
sure.
kid that it's a freshman that had the itches a freshman year and decides to go back to school, the itch gets stronger. And he's had a good year. And the older they get, the more success they have in college, the quicker they will be to pull the trigger to come into the draft. And so, I just might I don't really have any insider information on this as far as dealing with anybody in his circle, but my gut's telling me that he's going to be in this year's draft. I've just kind of thought from the get go that he would be a guy for this year. But yeah, if he doesn't feel comfortable with his range, yeah, I mean maybe he'll consider going back to school and say, hey, let me have a whole nother summer of working on my outside shooting,
Yeah.
because if he's able to progress there, that certainly would improve his draft stock.
Yeah, because Trayvon Duvall was a few years ago, and he was one and done, but he didn't get drafted. And what is the process when guys think that they're going to be? I'm sure Trayvon thought he was going to be a first round pick, and he wound up getting undrafted. What was he listening to the wrong people? Do you think in that situation where he could have came back and worked on his game more and maybe get drafted? What do you think, when that happens with players, when guys, they're stars in high school, they go to the programs, they go for 1 year and then they don't get drafted, and what went wrong? What do you think goes wrong in that situation? And
Well, I mean, I don't know if I necessarily want to comment on Trayvon's situation specifically, as I just don't have enough information. But generally speaking, there is a lot of kids that take poor advice, listen to the wrong people, and get impatient. And I mean, I think there's a number of agents that tell players what they want to hear and have them come out and sign them, and just so they can start making money on them. And handlers, the same idea. It's just there's a lot of ugliness behind the scenes.
yeah,
And so I think most of the time it's kids taking advice, the wrong advice from the wrong people. Um, but yeah, with Trayvon, I don't know specifically what his mindset was.
yeah. Um, with do you like the one and done rule?
I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I've been asked this before, and sort of my take is okay. I have all this experience representing players, and so I mean, essentially, from a player's standpoint, is okay. If you have a market to make money, you should be able to do that. And so, from that standpoint, I don't like the one and done rule. But on the flip side, I grew up in an NBA family, so I've got some loyalty to the league too. And from that standpoint, I'd rather players be more seasoned and come in a little bit more mature. I think it'd be better for the game. It'd be better for the product that we're putting out there. I mean, like the NFL, has guys have to go for what 2-3 years, and I would prefer that from the league standpoint. So it's I don't know what the answer is. I mean, there probably should be some kind of happy medium.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like college MLB and college baseball has their system where if you want to go straight to the pros, again, high school to the pros, you can do that. But if you go to college, you're gonna have to commit to 2 to 3 years in college. Do you think something like that could work?
Yeah, I mean, it's working for them.
Yeah,
I don't see the players' union agreeing to something
yeah,
that
definitely not.
extreme.
Yeah,
It's yeah, I don't know. I mean, and then it would, the difference is too with baseball, they've got the farm system, all these different teams. I mean, there's just not an infrastructure that's close to that within the NBA. Obviously, the G League is, it's getting better when it's getting close to where every team has their own team, but it's still a one small team that's part of their minor league system.
yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I think we're ways off from anything like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the players union would never agree to that too. I definitely agree with that. So before I let you go, I just what is the strength of this 2020 draft class, and what's the biggest weakness as far as positions?
Oh, I mean, it's a very guard-heavy draft. I mean, especially towards the top end. I mean, there's a lot of point guards and combo guards, which is going to make it interesting for guys like Trey Jones or Devin Dotson that are, borderline first, second round type guys. Hey, do we want to come out this year and try and sneak our way in? Because you go down the list. I mean, you got LaMelo Ball, Killian Hayes, Nico Mannion, R.J. Hampton,
Yeah.
Theo Maledon, Tyrese Halliburton. I mean,
Oh,
it's
I
just
love Tyrese Halliburton. I love
Cole
Tyrese.
Anthony. I mean,
Yeah.
it's deep. And the next tier you got Kyra Lewis. I personally don't see Tyrese Maxey much as a point guard, but I mean he's a high-rated guard. Dotson, Trey Jones. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's a lot
Yeah.
of point
This is
guards.
there's so
It's
many
a tough.
guards.
Yeah, it's a tough draft for a point guard to sneak in. And then the weakness I think is big men, and it's more of just the way that the game is evolving. A lot of these guys that would have value before, it's just they're being evaluated differently. It seems like each year big guys are gradually slipping a little bit. And so I mean, I'm arguing that Wiseman still should be considered a top three guy. But I mean, he would have been an elite pick
Yeah.
15, 20 years ago. And
Oh yeah, he
now,
was lock number one.
yeah, he'd be a lock. I mean, 20 years ago, Wiseman would be a lock number one. Like it'd be like the Zion of this year's draft. And
Yeah.
he's not there. And it's because of how the game's being played. And so, other guys, I mean, like a good example for this would be Udoka Azubuike from KU.
Oh yeah,
And
he's a monster.
and I love Dope, man. He's a big dude. He dunks everything. He's got great
Yeah.
hands.
Very
And
physical.
but he's just a big old boy that's kind of a throwback big, and it's just
Yeah.
he's probably gonna have to claw his way in, just because of the way the game's played, and so I mean if he's having to kind of claw his way in, I mean good luck for some of these other big guys.
Yeah, for sure. One more before I let you go. If the Knicks have the number one pick, if the NBA gods, finally give us the number one pick, who would they take right now?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, they're reworking their whole front office. They're likely going to have a new coach. I mean, I don't know what image they're wanting to pursue. I mean, it's really hard to say. And I mean, I think they potentially could have a lot of moving parts there. I mean, are they going to stick with Randall? I mean, if not, I mean, he'd be an easily tradable guy. I mean,
Oh
could
yeah, for
Toppin
sure.
be in play there? Wiseman, I mean, with Mitchell Robinson in play, I would say Wiseman probably isn't the best fit. But I mean, hey, you could trade Mitchell Robinson in a heartbeat, right? If you
Oh
wanted
yeah.
to. And so they're a really interesting one because I mean, you could really plug in any of these top guys. I mean, I think the first tier for me would be not necessarily in this order, but Wiseman, Edwards, Toppin, Avdia, and LaMelo Ball. I think
Uh-huh.
all those guys could be options there, just depending on what who they're wanting to commit to that's already on the roster.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot. There's a big off season for the Knicks. Obviously, they're gonna have a lot of changes, so it's definitely gonna be interesting to see which way they go if they do get the number one pick. It's not definite, but they definitely gonna have an interesting off season, the Knicks, and see what they're gonna be doing. But
Right.
Matt,
I think
I thank you
I
so
think
much. Oh no, you
yeah,
go.
I say I think the Knicks have an interesting offseason every offseason.
Oh, being a Knicks fan, it's every offseason is very interesting.
Yeah.
It's
Hopefully
always
this will,
something. It's
right. Hopefully
always
this will
something.
be a good interesting one though.
I hope, because Brooklyn's they taking a lot of spotlight, especially over here in New York. So we need
Sure.
something positive.
Right.
But Matt, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. No. Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Yeah, do you have you could plug your social media where people could find you?
Yeah, sure. My Twitter account is Matt Babcock11, and then also our company is at BabcockHoops, and I think that's pretty much our username on all the major social media outlets. And follow us, and we're providing a lot of content on the NBA draft and just different stuff, about basketball and our past, and follow us.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt, and take care, guys. Peace.
Thank you.